Hey folks, welcome back to another Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at the Cats of Mont Saint Michel, which is brought to you by Raybox Games. It's for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and games generally run about 20 to 40 minutes. A dark time has fallen on the place and the humans who inhabit it. The Cats of Mont Saint Michel is a miniature solo cooperative campaign game set in the historic monastery Saint Michel and just before the French Revolution. You will be playing directly on the coil-bound scenario book and using 12-sided dice for combat and collecting cards for loot, skills, and power. The game plays over a series of linked scenarios forming a campaign and an ongoing story. Each previous scenario in the campaign affects the start of the next. As you play each scenario, your hero will come closer to reaching their ultimate goal of ridding the abbey of the villainous rats and their brethren. Along the way, you will need to defeat swarms of roaches, warrior rats, and foul beings. You will also be gaining experience and unlocking unique skills. And the game will take several settings to complete, but you can always easily save your progress. So as far as adventure games go, I really like this adventure style within a book that you can easily set up and dive into the game within minutes. And they've done a great job. You can really learn the game pretty quickly and know what to do and how to maneuver around the world. So within this book, you'll see a set of instructions. You've got some nice flavor text at the top. You've got a list of what the different enemies are going to be, and you're going to be placing those out random on the different R positions. Now, through the course of the game, as you move the round marker, you'll see S, S1, N, things like that, and that will be a way to trigger more things to spawn in the world as you engage and move through the different rounds. But also, it'll show you what your objectives are. It's going to have maybe some interesting different types of rules that are going to maybe contradict what's in the rule book, but anything in this scenario is the way you're going to be playing for that particular adventure. And then you're going to find out where you need to take things if you're picking up different types of items or whatever. But here it'll show an exit structure, and if you defeat the big baddie, you'll also be able to go to the end of the book and read an additional excerpt, and just gives you some more flavor text and more story, which I love. That kind of thing in these type of games is just adventuring, and story driven games are really kind of my big thing that I enjoy the most. Now for this demo, this prototype I received, I got standees and markers for the creatures and the heroes and so forth, but you can play with either or, and when you reveal the markers on the board, you can put the standees out. Now, you also will have the option to get some really nice detailed miniatures, and they look fantastic. I really can't wait to check those out. Now also, throughout the course of setting up, these different markers that you can put out, everything is labeled on the map, and I love that aspect. But you have small squares that you'll be moving through, but you also have the larger square. And based on how you do your movement will determine which of those you're going to be using and how you will deal with adjacency and so forth. So the map is very clear. You've got different areas with red boundaries, which are going to block line of sight or walls that you can't see through or interact through. There's also yellow barriers, which are going to give you a -2 in your rolls if you try to fight through those or do maybe ranged attacks or whatever. You do have a diminished capacity, but you can still see through them to some degree. And like any good adventure game, line of sight is going to be a key thing moving throughout, and there's a really nice guide in the rule book to show you exactly how that works as you deal with different barriers, walls, and areas that you can kind of see over and so forth. But in general, the monsters or the enemies, as they move around the board, they won't be known to you until they come within line of sight, and you flip them over, and then you have to deal with them and what's happening within that world. So it's key things for sure to keep in mind as you're adventuring and trying to fulfill the objectives of that scenario. Along with the markers and the standees, there's a whole series of tokens to be mindful of. You've got health, you've got depleted tokens, you've got stun tokens, you've also got cat scratches, but more importantly, out on the board, you have objective tokens and you've got loot tokens. Yes, there's a whole deck of cards that you can get loot from. Not only from adventuring, but in between adventures, you can visit the tavern, which you will have to do in general, but you can recover, and hopefully recover anyway, and get more items and spend some gold and so forth. But you also have additional tokens here showing like toxic goo, or if you're vulnerable. So these tokens are coming into play in various ways through the different scenarios. So the theme here, you are heroes, but you're also cats, trying to rid the area of the dreaded rats and their minions like roaches and so forth. But it is really an interesting mix of different types of creatures, and theme just really works well. Now the thing with the heroes is that you have your own hero board with all your different stats, and all the villains have their own stats on cards as well. But let's take a look at these. If you have weapons, and you'll find them by looting and going to the tavern and buying weapons and so forth, but in general, they're going to have all the stats, everything you need to know right on this card. Now, all the icons on the left side of the card are pretty much the stats you're going to be engaging with through the course of the game for your heroes or for your enemies, and it's all very, very straightforward. So first and foremost, we're going to be rolling 1 dice for the rapier, and in this game, you're using 12-sided dice. So you're also going to see, is it a 1 or 2-handed weapon? And then you can stun your opponents with this weapon if you roll between a 5 and 7. Anything over that, an 8+ is going to do damage to your opponents. Now, a lot of these different enemies are going to have very type of health, but like roaches are 1 health, you're going to knock them out immediately. And then you're going to see the range at the very bottom. Now, 0 range is basically adjacent, makes sense, but you can have multiple ranges like 1 or 2, and you count the full square on the board for that, not the little squares. So you'll count 1 or 2 squares away, and that's the range you can hit at. So there's very different abilities of the different items and weapons that you're using at the very bottom of the card. But what's also important to note that you will be leveling up through the course of the game. There are level up cards, and I only got to experience 3 of the level 1 cards. But as you do level up, you'll get some interesting choices around cards. Like here, if you attack with a rapier, you get a +1, which is very helpful in all your rolls trying to do actual damage instead of stunning your enemies. So each round of the game, the heroes will go, the enemies will go, and then you'll move the marker and potentially, well, usually spawn more creatures. But the thing here is that you as the heroes have a set of different types of actions that you can spend action points on. And here in this scenario, the way I have it set up, you're going to be spending 3 for each of the characters. So doing all kinds of various things. But let's talk about movement first because it's kind of the key thing for the cats. First, we have prowl. You'll spend an action point to move 1 small square, just 1 at a time. But you can also stride. You're moving along quickly here, where you move 1 big square at a time. And where you end up, you can land on any one of the little squares. So maybe placing yourself adjacent to someone to attack them for another action point. But you have one other movement. You have pounce. Yes, like it sounds, you'll spend 2 action points here, but you'll move up to 2 spaces and then attack. So you'll do it all in kind of one fluid motion, but it does give you a bit of a disadvantage when you do that, but it is a really great way to engage quickly with someone or an enemy and just take them out. But pounce will also make you vulnerable. You have a vulnerable token you put next to yourself. Really just means that you're easier to hit. The enemies will get a +2. But also you're going to be spending action points on just simply attacking, or you might spend action points on looting, searching areas. You also can remove stun tokens, things like that. And there's also some free actions that don't require you to spend any points, like picking up an item. So lots of neat things what you can do with your character, but it all makes sense and it's very easy to engage with. Now, the enemy, they have a very limited set of actions they can perform as well. They have movement, right? And they can move the little squares. They can also remove stun tokens, but there's a whole guide around what those enemies can do and how they engage with you. But either way, you're still just rolling the dice to see if you stun or you hit and do damage to folks and so forth. And as you gain in strength with the heroes, you're obviously going to be bigger and better with hopefully armor eventually to help protect you from some of those things. So that's the basics of what you're doing in this game. Again, it's going to be very dependent on the scenario you're playing, what you're actually doing. And I'm not going to really spoil much of the story because I found it to be really engaging. I like those little story bits here, and I'm not going to really show a bunch of those to you. But in general, obviously, you win the scenario or you lose and have to try again perhaps. But I like the fact that there are elements within the scenario that make you go and read certain aspects of the story and guide you through and get you ready for that, perhaps that next adventure within the adventure book. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, the theme again here is just really fun. I like that the heroes are cats, the enemies are rats, and their minions like roaches and so forth. Lots of different enemies to deal with, and boss level creatures like the Norwegian Brown, who has a mace and a pistol that you have to deal with when you fight him. Definitely a higher level creature that you have to gear up for to some degree. And just that in general, how you level up your characters, get different items and gear and weapons and so forth, just adds a lot of good fun to this game for sure. And it just is beautifully done. The artwork here in the book is just really well done, as well as just the simplicity of play. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it for me. And until next time, we'll see you at the table.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.